Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are live here on session 3, Trace. Uh,
Oh,
I don't know.
Trace.
Drei
It's,
auf Deutsch.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, impressive.
I'm just trying to for all of the European watchers.
What
This
about what
session.
about Colome? Colome is Finnish.
Oh,
I just want to throw it in there. I want to ask more of it. We're
Tell
on
me
our
more.
third session. Well, we're on our third session, and
Yeah.
so I feel like I want to be able to add just a little bit more value. So I figure since you're throwing in a couple of languages
Mhm.
that you might know, I spent a little time in Finland, and I did learn how to count to three. So there we are.
I think I know why. Because every
You
time,
might.
just
you
this is beyond my head.
Let's
Tim,
go.
Tim, Tim is a in basketball, Robert, and so
Got it.
that's why I was saying maybe he knows how to count to three.
That's all it
But
is.
yeah, but thanks for showing me up with your Finnish. And Robert, do you speak any other languages?
No, unfortunately, no.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Tim just speaks Finnish just casually.
But I
Uh,
understand other languages when they speak because I used to work for European companies, so I got a taste for all across the world different languages. I could
got
understand
it.
and speak it.
Got it. Well, we're here live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and the Bookface, and we are doing our third training with Tim live session. So if you haven't joined these before, I had this thought when Tim started in packaging, working at Myers. I've got this awesome network of people. I created a post. I tagged a whole bunch of folks on there, and a lot of y'all just came through and were like, yeah, we'd love to sit down with Tim and share not only about what you know, and because I don't know a lot, but I know a lot of people who know a lot. And so I want to be able to connect Tim up, and then by extension, the network of people to the industry expert. So for session Colame, is that what it was?
That was pretty good.
Was it?
Colome.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. We've asked Robert Champion from Iniflex Solutions. Robert was on my podcast pre-COVID, so I don't even remember when the date was. It was sometime before COVID. That's how I
Yeah,
think of time now.
yeah.
And we've continued to stay in touch. He's become a good friend, a tremendous person in the industry. And so, Robert, why don't you first of all, actually, if you're actually watching this live, then thank you. And if you have any questions, comments, you want to drop in, I think we can see some of them. Maybe not on Facebook or YouTube. One of them we can't see comments or questions, but if you want to drop those in, that would be great. Uh, Robert, why don't you do a quick introduction on what it is that you do?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Adam, and also Tim. As Adam alluded to, I'm Robert Champion. I'm president of Inoflex Solutions. We're in the food and beverage space and on the packaging system side of it. So we are a holistic consulting and engineering firm that strive for excellence in operations and in CapEx investments, doing it nimbly, doing it quicker than the norm, and doing it for sustained results. So we try to make sure we win early and do it quickly.
That's awesome. And shout out to Greg Bentley. Greg is, I think you're still at Westrock. Is that right? He's over in the UK. So he jumped on. Greg's a great person to know for both of you. If you haven't connected up with Greg, you should do that. And vice versa, Greg. Make sure you link up with Tim and Robert. And maybe I can get Tim over, get a reason to go over to the UK.
Yeah.
And Robert, all three of us, we're all going.
Let's
There
We're
go.
all
you
just,
go.
yeah.
Yeah. Put it on the
Uh,
list.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction. And Tim, do you want to introduce yourself as well for people who are tuning in for the first time?
Yeah. So Tim Drisdom, and I am a sales rep at Myers Printing and Packaging. I sell labels and boxes, and I'm brand new to the industry, and excited for session three with Robert, and thankful for the opportunity that Adam gives me to learn from his network of people. I've learned a ton, so I'm
That's
excited to
awesome.
jump in.
That's awesome. And one of these times we're going to have a new sales rep and we're going to be like, it's training with so-and-so. And we've got industry expert Tim Drisdom on.
Here we are.
That's going to happen. That's going to happen. By the way, we are apparently always welcome. So we don't even need a visa now. We can just jump on. Oh, and Dustin. What's up, Dustin? Dustin's out in the Minneapolis area, Tim.
Sweet.
Dustin, thanks for jumping on, and hopefully you can connect up. So today, what the reason I'd reached out to Robert is Robert has spent the bulk of his career, correct me if I'm wrong, on packaging automation and equipment. And at Myers, we make stuff that goes onto packaging automation equipment. And so I thought we'd have a nice session on how is it that the stuff that we make, labels and folding cartons, how does that impact the equipment and then also the processes through a plant? Robert, you spent a lot of years at like Nestle and some other big companies, I believe. So like, let's have a chat through that. And maybe I'll let you start it off, Robert, just in terms of like kicking off the conversation here on when we make something, a label or a box, like why is it important to understand what's happening in the plant?
Yeah, that's a good lead in, Adam. Again, I think one of the most important things about selling consumer products, and whether you're on the front side or the actual production side or the supply chain side, is understanding how it works inside the operation where you're selling to. For instance, materials. I won't get too deep because it'll take hours to get through this, but I think as far as helping Tim understand it from an end user standpoint, materials are a component of the overall process. So let's just call that. So there's really, I'm going to say 4 components I want to focus on right now is inbound materials and materials used in production, whether they're labels or corrugate boxes or chipboard cartons. Then there's equipment, right? That takes that material and does something with it with product, primary stuff that goes in the box or label goes onto it. Then there's people, right? So I'm just going to say those are the 3 main cogs. There's other main cogs, but it's very important to know that how each one impacts the expectations of an operation. And I think that's really important. So when we think about labeling, we think, no big deal, right? Whether you're coding on a box directly or you're printing on a label, printing and applying that information from a label and putting it on a container, we think it's easy stuff, right? You just order it, you order your ink, you got your coding system, your labeling system there set up, and you run your different SKUs. But one of the things that's not really understood by material suppliers and then the end user is that labeling system, though it may only cost, let's just say $50,000 US, on a production line, it costs, that $5 million packaging system, that if that line is down for 1 minute, just as an order of magnitude, producing, say, 200 products a minute in a 20-hour shift, you're talking about in a half hour, $30,000 worth of unsaleable product that didn't get sold. Not talking about the cost of the energy, the labor, utilities, et cetera, that go into that equation. That's a lot of money. And I think what gets lost is we oversimplify the importance of the variables in labels and in the equipment and also people capability. And I think we need to heighten that up. So I think, Tim, it's a good segue when we start talking about, the type of label applications that we're talking about, branding labeling, for aesthetics on a product, or if it's for supply chain and logistics to move it through the system. Both are very, very important. So I want to focus this conversation around, the labeling that gets products from inception and through out of the warehouse onto the stores and into consumers' hands. And I think, if you talk about the different materials, whether it's plastic labeling or, paper-based labeling, whether it's, digital printing or thermojet or inkjet printing on that label, that there's going to be some downtime associated with that. And I'm not sure the material supplier understands their impact to the operations when that downtime happens. So
interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when you talk about downtime, you're not necessarily talking about like an equipment malfunction. Is that part of that downtime? Like what can you speak to the downtime?
Yeah, good question. So let's talk about unplanned. So unplanned is the worst that you can have. Planned is planned and it's acceptable, but still you don't want too much planned downtime.
Sure.
But unplanned, that's when you want to produce and you can't produce because something isn't it's not allowing you to produce. And that could be, Tim, it could be the wrong label, the wrong code information, downloaded from the ERP system to put the right information in the coding head to transfer it to the label to the package.
Yep.
Or it could just be, and I put this down. This is one of the big ones: is geometry compatibility between the package you're labeling and the product context surfaces. And that's part of, let's just talk about, like, in the operations, it could be, are you set up to run that package pre-flighting the line? So are all the standards and routines checked off, whether it's done electronically or digitally or, on a board? Is it all baseline? And if it is, you hope you minimize, unplanned downtime, because again, that's at $30,000, for, a half hour worth of downtime, $1,000 a minute. That it happens quite frequently. And what happens is, at the end of the day, the end user, when that becomes habitual, then that's abnormal. The abnormal becomes normal. And then companies are looking at who are the right suppliers that we need to pivot to. And then that opens up the table for more people at the desk to have the conversation with procurement about, we want to be involved as a strategic partner. And so some of that is really, I think, understanding your customer's operations. So I would say one of the, downtime, Tim, is, spending a little bit of time in your customer's facility. Go to the facility, stand and watch and observe what's going on with the materials. How do the operators engage with that equipment? Okay. And then the routines that are taking place on that line. So most operations have routines. And they're because of, it could be compliance or regulatory requirements that they stop a production line, planned stoppages. Sometimes it's unplanned because of jams. And then, you say to yourself, you take a step back and say, what do I do? How do I contribute to that with what I provide to that line? And then how can I improve that? And I think a lot of suppliers really don't step into the production facilities and spend the day to assess what's going on inside.
That's a great point. Tim, did you have, somebody actually asked a question here in the comments. Did you have a follow-up to that at all?
It's kind of probably a silly follow-up, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
No,
is there, and kind of along those same lines of downtime, is there a way to plan for unplanned downtime? So is that a lead time communication between in my role, right? Is there hey, this could happen, that could happen? Is that does that happen in the lead time? Do we put that in the lead time? It's like just a way to think about.
That's a very good question, Tim. No one's asked that before on the front end, but here's how I would answer that. And I'm going to go into one of the questions I had in mind. It's about variability. Okay. So what your material probably has, your labeling material may have some variability in it. I don't know. The coding system that applies the graphics to the label that puts it on the package may have variability. I think it's understanding the tolerance of each system.
Okay.
And then to answer your question, if you knew that, you could design that into the overall operations to absorb some of that. And that's Tim, to be honest with you, that's one of the most important questions of all the things we could talk about today, is do we understand the variability of the materials, the equipment capabilities, and then the operators, their ability, skill level, and how to diagnose problems, whether it's visual or it's data capture automatically through their system that tells them there's an abnormality on the HMI, et cetera. Very good question, Tim. I'd like to see more of that, of understanding the variables in the system. And I think if we were to do that, you would see your cost of goods sold, that variable, meaning the unfavorable costs that you don't want to have, will come down, because you will try to capture that on the front end. And that will, if you go into a customer, a client, and you talk about variables and understanding your product variables, and then you walk their facility, you understand their variables, and you have a holistic conversation about system variables, you got my ear when I was at the major companies. And that's not, and again, your audience is procurement people, so you're talking a language of material and cost. Now operational, right? It shifts to operational. Yeah. And then we talk about, now that you made that, put that label on that said product, how does it move through the system? When we talk about legibility of the graphics or the compliance information to move it from point A to point B inside the storage system and then inside to the warehouse.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great point. You know, that one of the best pieces of advice I got when I first started in the label world was actually something you said, Robert. It was from a friend, and Tim, you actually met Chris Dorr at an event with Myers, and Chris told me, he said, go spend time with people who have to stand on their feet for a living. And when you get into the production facility, I remember one time I was had a great business review meeting, and they said, yeah, your labels are great with some procurement and marketing people. The printing's great. And then I went into the production facility and I started to look, and I'm like, hey, how are our labels performing? And they were like, we hate them. And I was like, oh, why? And they started talking about the liner and how the liner was always breaking on them. And so that, you know, that's unplanned downtime, right? Like you expect when you load up a roll of labels, it's going to run until it's done with its labels. And so we actually ended up going through and working with them and changing out the liners in such a way that it would be better. So
Adam, let me add to that, Adam. I think that's another segue. That's a great one. It's called, and it's used in the industry, it's called modes of operation. So that's the key. What I mean by modes of operation, and I talked about this slightly earlier, is how does the facility operate your commodities to produce the goods that they want to sell? Meaning they have routines, and if you're just selling labels, you're not concerned really about the machine per se. It's going to go and, you put it to make sure it functions and does what it should do. But the machine has a role now, right, to do its job. But also we talk about, again, the material component, the equipment, and the people. I tell you what, from shift to shift, you're going to have variability too. So then how do you design, so we don't have finger pointing between equipment and materials. How do you become a partner with your customer to say, man, I was there first shift, watch a little bit, second, third. I see some things differently. Maybe I need to work with the equipment supplier. I know what my materials can do. Let me lock in who you have as equipment supplier so we can align and be a partner to you. And at the end of the day, you're servicing that company to be excellent, right? And it's about winning in that area. And I think not a lot of that is done. And that's, as Tim said, if you can do that earlier on, have most of that conversation in the front end. And that's system selling, right? It's not commodity selling, it's system selling, even though you're selling a commodity.
I love that phrase.
And Tim, I think one of the other things, go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to get to Darius's question here. It says, Robert, does Inoflex manufacture equipment? If so, would love to pick your brain further.
I've been asked that before. We don't. We have experience designing packaging equipment. We've done it for years in food and bev. But to answer your question, no, we don't, Darius. But we should talk more about how to help you if that's all possible.
Got it. Well, hopefully you both can connect up. Sorry, Robert, what were you going to say there? And we're probably coming up here on
the
time. End. Yeah, I got a couple minutes left, but I just want to make sure that we let people get back to their days.
Give me a couple of nuggets because we don't have. I think one of the other.
Let's go Nuggets.
That's awful. That's just an awful way to use that.
Oh my God!
So I got mine right here. Two-time MVP Nikola Jokic.
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Back to back. Don't worry.
Oh boy. Yeah,
let's not get sidetracked. I'm always good for a good rabbit trail, but let's hear some.
Let's hear some nuggets.
Here's the deal too. With sustainability, is heavy on the radar, as you know. That the composition of your materials, how you can help your company, your end users save. Not only just sustainable material. I'm going to go again. What's the compatibility between that and the equipment? How are we aligned if the suppliers of the capital equipment are on the same pace as you when you launch new materials, that they're not part of your company's, they're not a component of your company, they're an external entity. So how are you ensuring that you can lockstep with them? Again, your end customer saying, I don't care if I buy a machine from this client or film from this client, it better run and it better run well. Because they're going to be changing materials for various reasons, saving them costs, innovation, right? They're going to be changing brands, doing some things, some smart stuff from marketing. So then again, sustainable materials always should be on your radar, and then working with your suppliers. So understand your customers' goals on sustainability. We can't get into all the materials. And then I'm going to say compliance. So for me, labeling and coding is all about branding and compliance. The compliance piece means, can I read the barcode if I'm putting a barcode on a label? Can I do it, and can it follow the quality standards of a regulatory body like GSI? I'm just making up one. That's one of them out there. Meaning, because if you can't move product, if you can't read it, you can't sort it and move it to where it needs to go in operations. So that label, though it's minuscule in cost, will wreak havoc on an operation if things go awry. Think about your Amazons and these DSDs and distribution center and all that high-end stuff there, right? So branding, label versus compliance, two different arenas, but sort of the same. And then the last point I'm going to make is I'm going to re-emphasize what I said earlier. I'm going to pound this home. Harmonization, materials, equipment, and operators. Just have that conversation, right? And then finally, I'm going to say the main drivers, if I were to look at everything, it's around cost, quality. Quality is king. And then I said, repeating myself, I'm going to say the legibility of whatever you put on the label. Aesthetics for the consumer's eye. Again, moving through logistics inside the facility. And if you look at these high-end facilities that are running at 500 pieces a minute or 200 or 1,000, wow. Think about the disruption if it doesn't work well for a $30,000 labeling system. So I would wrap up and say, think big picture, think broad, engage with your customer as a system supplier, know a little bit about the labeling equipment. You don't have to be an expert. Lock in step with some of the key companies and make sure you go in and you understand your customer's variability, and that's spending time with them.
Robert, you're speaking Dustin's language here, optimization. He exclaims with the exclamation mark. That's great. I took a ton of notes. That was incredibly insightful to me. I've never asked the question about unplanned downtime caused by poor label materials, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a critical question to help understand the difference between a label printer and a solution provider, right? You're making the same thing, but on the one hand, you're asking questions that say, like, I care about the label from, inception till it's, till the end of its life. I want to follow that whole thing and see where we can cause, or where we might be causing disruption, or where your current supplier is.
Yeah.
Tim, what fantastic Jamal Murray's did you take away?
We go back to the Nuggets again. Okay.
I just, they just played last night. It was.
I think one of the bigger things that I took away from it is actually being in the facility. I thought one of the first things I did when I joined Myers is I went down to the plant and met the guys who were operating the machines, and I didn't learn a lot in that because it was just a lot to learn.
Sure.
But what I did pick up was what I felt like passionate and how much pride they took in what they were doing, and how much they cared that we were on the floor and that we cared, like we asked questions about what they were doing, because I think that adds value and I think they see the importance. And so I'm always happy to be reminded of the, like Adam said, spend time with the people who who work on their feet, right? Mm-hmm. And so, that relationship, building that relationship, because then when things do go bad, and they they will, right? Yeah. There's a relationship intact that ensures that the communication doesn't have to go through these little stumbling blocks on the way to the solution. Sorry, I'm talking too fast because I'm looking at the time. But
Oh, you're fine.
that was one of the things that was pretty big. And I'm trying to remember what you said about it was a systems process or like what did you say?
Well, think system sell a
System
system,
selling.
not a
Sell the
commodity.
system. That's what it was.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Tim, you had one good point that through my career that helped me, and if I could say if there was any level of success, is you said the key thing is relationships. I learned a lot, from people doing the work, building trust, getting knee deep in their problems to understand it, really having curiosity. Like I really want to understand what the problem is, and whatever my skill sets are, I try to connect and find solutions. But now they know I really care about their day to day. And as you said, I can call them on the phone and have that conversation and they'll answer. They'll be willing to give you free information because they know you care. And I think let's not lose hold of that, until we replace everyone with automation, if that ever happens, as long as there's a few people around, you got to build that network. And I claim a lot of my success to relationships.
That's
as
awesome.
I said earlier.
That's great. Well, Robert, how would people like Darius get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, there's several ways. And I'll give you my mobile, right? So I'll just, you say, why did you? My mobile is, because I'm always moving around, is 248-214-8480. Also look us up on the website on www.innoflexsolutions. That's with an S.com.
It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen.
And I got an office number here. I don't even know what that freaking number is. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about that.
Don't memorize, but it's on the website.
How can they fax you questions?
Yeah, we
Can they
love to hear
fax
from
you?
more people. What's that?
Did you say fax?
Yeah, can they just fax you with?
Yeah, what's the fax?
Yeah. What's your pager?
What?
The Nuggets still use pagers.
Oh, I see how it is. Well, Robert,
You text me, I get back to you quick.
Perfect. Everyone look up Robert on MySpace. No, I really appreciate it. I know you're also reachable on LinkedIn, so thanks for dropping yourself. 248-214-8480 in case you missed it. Robert, I really am super grateful have you jump on, share just some great wisdom, and Tim for continuing to be just great and humble and vulnerable and learning through this process. And we'll keep cranking away here. Dustin, thanks for jumping on. Darius, appreciate you. Greg, I hope you got a chance to fall asleep over there in the UK. But thanks for jumping on. Tim and Robert, thanks to you as
problem.
well.
Guys,
And
have a great afternoon.
Definitely. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Until next time.